mind concepts around innovation and challenging ourselves to be forward-thinking. I think in industry in general and in sports in specific, sometimes it's easy to get caught up in patterns of being in a sea of sameness and doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. But when we embarked on this search, it was really important for us to see if we could do something a little bit different. And quickly in our conversations with JJ, it was very evident that he had a unique perspective and philosophy on basketball and how it's to be taught. I think immediately when we sat down in Chicago at the Combine, we shared a basketball philosophy that was very similar, and it was based on high-level strategy. It was based on a certain way of communicating with players and teaching them, and probably most importantly, prioritizing player development. For people in the room that study this new cap system that we're now under in the NBA, there's a hard system with, you know, first and second apron, and I could get into all the details, but at the core of that is going to be the importance of a great franchise like the Lakers modernizing and leaning into developing our young players and building that. And with players here like Max Christie and Jalen Hood-Schifino and Austin Reeves and Rui and on, it became evident that one of JJ's passions was bringing some of the incredible things he's done in basketball thinking and in basketball content to player development as we build out that. And I think that's going to be something that's really exciting for our fans to see, is how we take a new and unique approach of Lakers excellence with player development and combining that with high-level strategy and high-level attention to detail on the basketball court, with how we play, with how we're organized, how we compete, and ultimately how we win. So a very, very proud moment for us today to introduce JJ Redick as our new head coach.
Thank you. Thank you. Rob, I appreciate it. This process has been surreal, to say the least. One of the things that kept coming up during the process with Rob, we kept talking about the word gratitude. And I think that's where I'll start, is just feeling so grateful for Rob, Jeannie, the entire Lakers organization for entrusting me in this position. And I take this responsibility very seriously. I have never coached in the NBA before. I don't know if you guys have heard that. My motivations for doing this, it starts with a very simple foundation of service. I think about the greatest moments, especially towards the end of my career, was about helping players. And so it starts with the desire to serve players, to serve the Lakers organization, to serve our fans. It's also about competition and performance, collaboration, leadership. These are the things that drive me, and they will all be important as I build out my staff, as we think about the people we want to draft and get in free agency, and as we think about player development. It's all about those things. When I think about the NBA today, you know, the game is evolving, and it's evolving fast. And one of the things in coaching that I think you have to be is adaptable. You have to be adaptable to your roster. You have to be adaptable in game planning against your opponent. And that's one of the things I really will strive to be. Lastly, I just want to say, like, sitting in this seat, I know what the expectations are. Lakers fans have some of the most passionate fans around the world. And the expectation is a championship. And so it's my job, it's our staff's job, it's Rob's job, it's all of us to deliver a championship caliber team. That's what I signed up for.
Hey, JJ, Mike Trudell with the Lakers and Spectrum Sportsnet. Amongst the things you were alluding to, just your personality, the competitiveness, Rob spoke about this, that drive. As a player, did you start to think about head coaching in that context, like the closest that you can get to fueling that, finding that competitive fire, and did that drive you at all towards this Lakers position?
There were certainly coaches that I had throughout my career that would say, you're going to coach someday. Doc was probably the first one that did that. But it was really when I was in Dallas at the end of my career, and I was hurt for most of those 2.5 months. I didn't play a lot. Rick Carlisle and I spent a lot of time together, and he really planted the seed about coaching. Now, at the time, I knew I was going to retire. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be able to be home for a little bit. I didn't think it was the right time. When I retired, when I retired, my performance coach and I, we talked about all the things that I loved about being a player, and it was a lot of those qualities that I just listed, and it's all part of coaching. And as I think about the culture we want to create here, part of that is just a competitive culture. Like, we want to come in every day thinking about competition.
JJ, Jim Hill, KCAL 9 News. Congratulations. You mentioned what you learned from Doc Rivers. What's the most important thing you learned from Doc that's going to help you to make an adjustment into the NBA with no previous head coaching experience?
The most important thing I learned from Doc, it's interesting because I probably took something from every coach that I ever played for. Doc was such a good motivator. And one of the things that I think he is particularly good at is creating a vision, communicating a vision, and then getting you to buy into that vision day after day. Now, those Clippers teams, we didn't reach our ultimate vision, unfortunately, but that's something that he was always so great at. He's an incredible communicator.
Welcome, JJ and Rob. Good to see you. If I could ask one of you both. Rob, obviously in today's media landscape, the twists and turns of a coaching search kind of become public fodder. Can you speak on, you guys are obviously very ecstatic to have JJ in this role, but there was a pursuit of Dan Hurley before, and just where did things stand? Did you put the JJ process on hold in that moment, and just how did that play out?
Yeah, happy to talk more about the entire process at another time. Today's sort of JJ's day, and I will say this, from the start, he was in our plan A pool of coaches that we were really interested in exploring. And I think the most important thing is throughout the process, JJ and I had direct and sort of constant communication to keep each other in the loop with what he was going through with his previous job with the NBA Finals. And I was keeping him abreast of the search. And I think sometimes before a partnership is forged, when you can have real, honest conversations before you actually become partners, it solidifies the relationship. And I think looking back to how transparent we were with one another, even in the midst of stuff going on in the media, I think it actually solidified our confidence and belief in working together.
And JJ, to retire after a long, successful career, a lot of athletes, it's a tough transition. You were able to quickly parlay that into a successful podcast venture, obviously broadcasting the NBA Finals. With that going in your direction, like that could have been what you did the next 20 years. Why did you decide that coaching was what you wanted to do with your basketball life?
I'll answer the question in a second. I want to follow up on something Rob just was talking about. And that's, when the process was going on and we first met in Chicago, I was getting ready to call game one of the NBA Finals when the Dan Hurley news broke. And Rob was quick to call me. We had a great conversation. During that whole 4-day period, like at no point was my ego or feelings hurt or bruised in any way. Dan Hurley is a 2-time national champion at UConn. I am a 2-time 55 Swiss League champion in the 3rd and 4th grade division. Like, I understood, I understood. It's funny because, Dave, I get that question all the time, and I've certainly gotten that question a lot from people that I trust and confide in over the last year. It was really after I interviewed for the Toronto job last year that I knew that I wanted to be a head coach in the NBA. And so the last year, I spent a lot of time talking to coaches, talking with GMs, picking their brains. I am very fortunate that I have a small circle of people that are currently working in the NBA that I am friends with, that I can confide in, that can help me. And the further I got into those conversations, the further I got into my own sort of journaling about coaching, thinking about it and visioning it. Rob and I talked about this a ton. I just felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, again, I brought it up, like I have zero coaching experience in the NBA, but I would argue that I'm very experienced. And it started 22 years ago when I went to Duke, and I got to play for Coach K for 4 years, spent 15 years as a player. Honestly, the last 3 years have been invaluable in preparing me for this moment. Being able to connect to players, talking to them on the podcast, being in coaching interviews with ESPN, calling games, analyzing the game in 3 different formats. All of that has helped prepare me to be an NBA head coach.
Rob, JJ, over here, Dan Wakey with the LA Times. Yes. Questions for both of you guys. JJ first. How do you kind of envision I think Jovan wrote something about Anthony Davis and kind of using him. How do you envision kind of Anthony Davis and LeBron James here as part of this team, provided LeBron resigns? And then Rob, for you, how are you going to sort of thread the needle of the late stage of potentially LeBron's career with the transition into whatever's next?
I think the first thing is with any player, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Austin Reeves, any player on the roster, I can have a vision for how I want to use them, but there has to be buy-in and collaboration, right? So I can sit up here and tell you how I would like for them to play, but if there's no buy-in, then it doesn't really matter. So I think part of the next 2 months, and I know those guys are going to be busy with Team USA, part of the next 2 months is just having conversations. And Anthony and I already had a conversation a week ago about some ideas, both offensively and defensively. And I think both of us felt really comfortable going forward with that sort of as the base starting point of how he's going to play on this team. And one of the things I brought up with him is just the idea of him as a hub. There's a bunch of guys at the 5 position in the NBA that sort of operate in that way, and I don't know that he's been used in that way and sort of maximize all of his abilities. So that's a simple thing with him. With LeBron, look, you have to certainly get buy-in and talk to him about how he wants to play. Him and I have joked about this, but like he shot over 40% from 3 this year. Like I want him shooting threes. He's going to have his 3 or 4 bursts every game where he gets out in transition and does things that no one at his age should ever be able to do, but he does it. It's really just figuring out in the half court, putting him in different spots, both as a scorer and a facilitator. That'll be part of the conversation over the next couple months.
Yeah, I think first we want to respect and honor LeBron's ability on June 29th to make a decision about his contract. He has a player option, as we all know. So definitely we'll give him that time to go through that decision. But I will say if he does return to the Lakers, the proof of concept in having 2 all-pro players as the core pieces of your team has worked for us to the highest level, of course, in 2020. But if those 2 players are at the core of what you're building, we like our chances. And of course, we'll continue to have conversations as we approach free agency here in the next week or so of how we want to tweak or make roster changes to put ourselves in a competitive position built around those 2 players.
Hey, Rob, JJ over here. Yovan Muha with The Athletic. First for JJ, how have you gone about preparing for this position, especially kind of through the interview process, and then how have you gone about developing your coaching philosophies?
Again, it goes back to sort of how I answered Dave's question. You know, some of my coaching philosophies lie in the different roles I've had post-retirement. I think a big thing for me is you have to look at your roster, and then you have to figure out how you can create margins with that roster. And this roster, you know, let's say last season, they did a good job of not fouling and getting to the line. They did a good job of creating a margin with fast break points and points in the paint. You know, when I think about that with this team, it was like, how do we generate good threes? How do we generate more of that? Defensively, how do we scheme better? How do we turn the ball over less? Like all these little margins, right? The team was 29th in offensive rebounding percentage. If you look at the trends of the NBA right now, teams that really value possessions are sending guys from the corner. They're not worried about getting three guys back. I mean, when I played, you were either a go guy or a get back guy. I think giving players the freedom, especially from the corners, to crash is huge. You can create a margin there. That all came from just analyzing the game over the last 3 years. You know, philosophically, culturally, again, those are all based on experiences. You know, when I think about culture, the foundation of it has to be competition. There has to be joy in it, though. Like the pursuit of greatness can't be miserable. Every day that somebody walks in this building, they have to enjoy it. I think part of being a coach, right, is like, can I maximize each player? That helps maximize the group. And does everybody in the building, not just the players and staff, does everybody in the building enjoy coming to work every day? That's sort of on me to create that culture.
And then one for Rob. As of Wednesday, you guys will have access to your 3 first-round picks. Have you thought, or I guess what can you share about how you potentially might use those? Are you thinking maybe something bigger move, a couple smaller moves? How are you thinking about building the roster over the next week or so?
Yeah, I think JJ hit it on the head when he said our goal is to build a team that compete for championships. You know, whether that's in the short term or the long term, we always have to balance those two things. And I do think in this system, as I opened, some of the trades are more difficult, especially if you have a second apron team and a first apron team. There's a chance we'll be in the first apron. The trades are less prevalent than they used to be. So will we look for trades that help us become a better team? Absolutely. Are those trades, did they have the same probability that they did under the old system? No, it is a different system. So we've got to be mindful and thoughtful around that. And I do think, as I stated at the beginning, part of the road to a really, really good team, and you can look around the landscape of the league right now with many young teams doing really, really well, is going to be lean hard into that player development piece. And of course, part of that is drafting the right way. We've had a great track record here of drafting good players and developing them. And we're going to continue on that path as well. So that's not a yes or a no. If the perfect trade comes along and we can use picks to make it and win a championship, yeah, we'll do it. Is that trade going to be there? I don't know. It's harder in this system to find perfect trades.
JJ and Rob, Kobe Price, Southern California News Group. Got one for both of you guys, but first, JJ, kind of a two-parter. Do you plan on coaching in both summer leagues? And how is the process of putting together a coaching staff come so far? Are there any names you can, I guess, tell us that you're targeting or bringing on?
No names for you. We've certainly discussed the names, but no names for you yet. Yeah. Summer League is certainly on the table. We have talked about this. There's a few factors, and we'll just sort of make the decision at the time, but I'll be heavily involved in Las Vegas. Our understanding, at least right now, is, you know, we'll still be doing a lot of free agency work here during that first part in Sacramento.
Yeah, just on the names question, Kobe, we've already started a very collaborative dialogue around how to build out JJ's bench, and, you know, clearly leaning into that experience with the front of the bench coaches and finding hopefully a couple guys that are former head coaches, I think is going to set JJ up for support. And at the end of the day, that's what we're most interested in doing, is make sure we help him select and build a staff that sets him and the team up for success. And that's beginning today on the first day of his job.
And then, Rob, one for you specifically. Obviously, JJ and LeBron, they have had a podcast going since March. Even if it wasn't direct conversations with LeBron, how, if it did that podcast factor into the process of the interview and all of it?
I think at the core of a really good NBA head coach, one of the core necessities, especially with today's player, is communication. And I think JJ's one of the best basketball communicators out there, period, hard stop. Anyone that's paid attention to what he's done and built and his interaction with players and coaches and executives, he's special at that. In terms of the involvement with our captains with this coaching search and the coaching process, I think, you're asking a question about LeBron. He was very supportive of our organization in this process. And that's a different word, and I want to be mindful of the word, than involved. So I would say it again. LeBron was very supportive of us and our process, but chose not to be heavily involved, and we respected that. Anthony Davis, our other captain, chose to be very involved and was very involved. I talked to him throughout the process and got a lot of help and wisdom from him, and he was very excited for today.
Melissa Rowland, Fox Sports. This is a two-parter too. Rob, I'm going to begin with you. JJ just broke the news that he's never had any NBA head coaching experience. Considering that, what was it during the interview process that he did or said that made you feel excited to go this route?
Yeah, I think NBA head coaching experience and NBA experience aren't mutually exclusive things. I think JJ has an amazing amount of NBA experience that's going to make him a great NBA coach. And he talked about it already, whether it's coming up being sort of mentored and tutored by a Hall of Fame coach and Mike Krzyzewski, whether it's the Hall of Fame coaches he played for throughout his career, whether it's the conversations with numerous all-stars that are high IQ players that he could share basketball and strategy with. It was just really important to us as we made this hire to find a head coach that could sit across the table from some of the smartest and best players in the world. This is the stage for those players to be able to relate to, coach, hold them accountable, lead them, inspire them. And we felt like JJ was very unique in holding all those qualities to do that, and we're very confident in that.
And JJ, it's obviously no secret that you have a very close relationship with LeBron. He could have done a podcast with anybody in the world. He chose to do it with you. What was his advice to you throughout this whole coaching search process?
He didn't provide any advice. LeBron and I did not talk about the Lakers job until Thursday afternoon, about 30 minutes after I was offered the job. And that was very intentional on both our parts. I knew I had an understanding that he did not want to be involved in this. And for me, I didn't want to go down the path of hypotheticals with someone that I consider a friend and someone that I have a great amount of respect for. So for us, it just came down to literally Thursday afternoon. And I talked to him for about 15, 20 minutes and got off the phone. That was it.
Dylan Hernandez with the LA Times. Hey, Rob, first for you. I think you mentioned, you used the word innovative in your opening remarks. Just wondering if there were any plans, to add to the analytics department, scouting, front office to maybe help find, JJ find those edges that he was talking about.
That's a great question, Dylan, and I think you've hit on a really important theme. JJ and I have had some really robust conversations around innovation and sort of even gamifying player development. If you think about a 20-year-old basketball player today and maybe a 20-year-old basketball player, 10, 15, 20 years ago, the modiums of learning are completely different. I mean, we all probably, some of us have kids, we have nephews, nieces. Kids and athletes are learning in new and innovative ways. So we've talked about how do we translate Coach Redick's offensive system to app-based or a phone-based deliverable, where players can be buying into a philosophy and learning it in a way that meets today's young player. And I think innovation's got to be at the core of that. We have a vision for, to your point, of hiring out his support staff in sort of this tech, bullpen way of getting innovative minds to help bring his basketball strategy and bring his basketball philosophy to life in a way that our players can grasp it, learn it, and actually grow their basketball IQ. I think there's no one in the room that would argue that JJ is not one of the highest basketball IQ players and thinkers in today's game. How do we now take that and deliver it to our players? That's our goal here, and something we're really, really excited about.
JJ, hi, over to your left. Hi, I'm Kyle Kraska with Fox LA. Congratulations. You mentioned in your opening statement that this expectation here is a championship, and that is what you signed up for. Lofty goals, obviously. How do you manage those expectations, and do you think that they are reasonable expectations in the short term?
To answer the second part first, yes, I think they're reasonable. I don't look at the current roster as being that far off from a championship caliber team. In terms of managing expectations, I think in life you just got to embrace things. You just really have to embrace things. You don't run from it. If you need to talk about it, you talk about it. There's not a player. I never played with players in the NBA who were like, you know what? This year's not the year. I don't think we can win a championship. Now, the expectations here are certainly different. And as we sort of build out the culture, one of the things, and Rob and I have talked about this, you have to let go of outcomes. You just do. It has to be about the enjoyment and embracing the process. And if the Los Angeles Lakers on day one get better every single day, I'm very confident that come April, we will be a championship caliber team. You still have to have a lot of stuff go right, and you can't have a lot go wrong. That's every single championship team. Just acknowledge that, right? But I think it is more about loving the process of getting better, the power of the group. If you look at the NBA now, and Rob is talking about the second April, look, if you look at the NBA right now, the group matters more than ever. You certainly need the stars, but the group matters more than ever. You need 6, 7, 8 guys who can play minutes deep into the playoffs. The Boston Celtics, the Dallas Mavericks, the Pacers, the Timberwolves. It wasn't about the individual. It was about the group.
Hi, JJ and Rob. Good to see you. Mark Medina, Sports Key, the Sporting Tribune. JJ, when it comes to accountability, what do you think that looks like when you're managing LeBron, AD, and the rest of the roster?
I think it's about establishing the standards early on. I think it's that simple. We just talked about expectations for a championship. What do you expect from me? What do I expect from you? Let's have that dialogue. Let's establish what the standards are day to day. It's as simple as that. I talk about, maybe not publicly, but I talk about conflict all the time because in the NBA, conflict exists. It's a natural thing in a competitive sport. The sport is conflict, right? Throughout an NBA season, it's okay to have internal conflict, right? I think you have to go about confronting those conflicts and holding people accountable, right? Confrontation to me is about conflict resolution, conflict avoidance, and being direct, being open. That's how you have to do it. But it starts with just a very simple baseline standard of what we're expecting of each other.
JJ Ramona Shelburne, ESPN. You mentioned something earlier that kind of caught my ear, and how you journaled about coaching. I think that's interesting, is journaling, right? Is how you get to there. And I was wondering, what did you write down? Where did you get to this place where this is the job that you wanted, right? I mean, you could have had another job a couple times ago. You've interviewed for other ones. You could have waited and stayed on our side of the business for a while, but you chose the Lakers. So what was it about this job, and how did you get to that process?
This job was about the Lakers. This job was about the Lakers. And it was about LeBron James, Anthony Davis, two of the greatest players ever. I've been able to do some incredible things in my life. I really have. I mean, Rob knows this. Like, Monday night, I called Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Thursday, I'm in Cameron. One of my sons is playing at Duke camp in the practice facility. The other son is in Cameron Indoor Stadium. And I'm on the phone with Rob and Jeannie committing to this job in the Duke Hall of Fame room. I've gotten to do some amazing stuff in my life, right? This might be the best. And when I think about, like, this job in particular, it's not just about getting the job. What I wanted to do was do the job. I wanted to coach the Los Angeles Lakers. And so that was where I landed on pursuing this versus, potential other opportunities.
JJ, 20 years ago, while you were at Duke, the Lakers tried to pry Mike Krzyzewski away from Cameron Indoor to be here. What did Coach K tell you in regards to maybe looking back at that, or just this job opportunity in general?
Yeah, Coach since 2004 has had a great relationship with the Lakers and the Buss family. He was very complimentary of the organization. And he was very helpful throughout this process. It started, I didn't know Coach had like Google alerts, or I don't know how he gets his news, but I guess somebody tipped him off that, I was potentially interviewing for Charlotte. So I was literally flying back from a game and landed at LaGuardia, and we talked for 30 minutes that night. Ultimately did not do the full interview there, and kind of put that coaching thing on pause. And then this opened up, and Coach throughout the process was very helpful in terms of just me navigating the interview process, Rob and I's communication, all of this stuff. Like, Coach was great. He still is, like, I've told the young guys this. I've talked to nearly every player on the phone. Some guys are ducking my calls. It's okay. But like Jalen and Maxwell, they were like, "Hey, Coach," and I'm like, "I'm not comfortable with that. Please call me JJ." There's one person in my life that I played for that I call Coach, and that's Coach K. Like, he's still that to me.
I think this it's relevant to this discussion. You were one of the first players to have a podcast while he was active. What's going to happen with Mind the Game? You're going to be the first coach to have a podcast while he's active?
No, I am, for the time being, and hopefully it's a very, very long time, I am excommunicated from the content space. So there would be no podcast. We'll do something when I have a breather from what we have coming up. I'm going to be drinking out of a fire hose for the next month. But at some point, we'll just do something for all the people that listened, and we'll have a small little video. But I'm done with podcasting for now.
For Rob and JJ Broderick Turner, JJ, Rob, you guys keep talking about culture. What does that mean, and how do you go about putting that in place?
What becomes immediately impactful when you get to spend time with JJ is he has a obsession about winning and an obsession about excellence. We've had players come through here that share that mindset. But I think the two things that come to mind in terms of culture are mixing the service component that JJ talked about at the beginning his job, my job, is not to be out in front as much as it is to be behind the players, supporting them to be great and providing all the resources, the coaching, the mentoring for them to be great. And then just obsessing about the details to get to a place of excellence and to get to a place of winning. I think that combination of those two divergent things is really important to our championship culture here.
I'll be very simple in my answer. Like, to me, culture is very simply two things. It's how a group interacts with each other, and it's the things that a group prioritizes. And so, as the head coach and as the GM, like, along with the players, we have to determine how we're going to interact with each other and what we prioritize. And it's all those things we talked about.
Mitch, were there a couple people that didn't get a chance that we want to? I'm more than happy. I know you guys traveled a long way to get here. Happy to do a couple more.
JJ, what are you most curious to learn about just the process and art of coaching, like as you go through this year?
My first challenge. No, it's interesting because I have, going back the last year, I've always been a visual person. As a player, I relied on visualization. In a workout in high school, I'd have a free period, and on game days, I would walk through the gym, and I would look at certain spots on the floor, and I would visualize coming off screens and where the defense would be and the angle which I shot the ball, the arc on the ball, and I've visualized every scenario. For the last year, that's what I've done in terms of coaching. And the fun part, I think, for me is just going to be actually having that become reality and learning. I consider myself to be someone who has a high level of curiosity and a love of learning. I'm not going to be perfect. I know that, right? The pursuit of perfection, which I've tried my whole life, I've recognized you're never going to get there. So giving myself a little bit of grace is going to be important. I'm not expecting grace from any of you. I don't expect that. It's fine. No, I really don't. I don't. But giving myself a little bit of that is going to be important. If there's like a specific thing, I mean, it's very simply, what is the feeling going to be like walking out for your first regular season game and sitting there and putting your hand over your heart for the national anthem? What is that feeling going to be like?
Hi, Coach. Yeah, I work for Kyodo News, Japanese News Wire. So I want to ask two questions about Rui Hachimura. First one is, obviously, roster is not set yet. However, how do you want to use his strengths on the court? And second one, he hasn't made it official yet, but in my opinion, he's probably playing for the Japanese national team in the Paris Olympic. If he does, would this affect your plans for Rui?
I'll start and then hand it off to Coach. We had the privilege this morning of being able to have some time with Rui. He was in the facility, and super excited to watch JJ coach him. And he did share with us, and I'm sure he'll have his own news that he's thinking through the Olympics, and hopefully there'll be good news there. But it was great to sit upstairs with him earlier today, and he's going to have a great summer.
Yeah, I thought he had a fantastic year last year. One of the things, and maybe I should have mentioned this to Ramona's question, but beyond just the Lakers and LeBron and Anthony Davis, I'm excited about some of the younger guys on this roster and helping them. I had great conversations this weekend. Two that I had that I loved were my conversation with Austin and my conversation with Rui. And, I think for him, in terms of how I envision sort of him on this team, Like, I want him shooting more threes. So that's a big part of it. I brought up the offensive rebounding. I think he can really become an elite offensive rebounder. As we sort of build out our offensive system and how we're going to play, when we start incorporating movement and cutting, Roy can be an excellent cutter, and part of that is because we're going to manipulate screening angles. He's going to get mismatches, and he can really score at the basket if he has smaller players on him.
First of all, Eric Pincus with Bleacher Report. Thank you, Rob, for a little bit of extra time. Just want to ask the coach here, you mentioned visualization, and coaching is a lot about details. Have you visualized how you will build out those chops of rotation management, end of game management, clock management, load management, like series management, everything that goes into those little details? And do you have a philosophy, a plan? Obviously you don't have the firsthand experience doing it yourself. You've been around it, you've experienced it through other coaches, and will that be something you rely on heavily with support from your bench?
Yeah, again, going back to just collaboration, like this is all going to be a really fun part of this summer over the next couple months leading into September, is thinking about all those things, right? Once the roster is set, rotations, game management, load management, all that stuff. I think a big, and I told Rob this in Chicago, this is like a big thing for me, is just my relationship and communication with analytics and my relationship and communication with performance. Those are as important as anything else that I can do as a head coach. And so I've certainly thought about all that stuff. It's obviously going to be dependent on the roster. But yeah, I'm going to use math.
Hey, JJ, Claire Dillon with The Guardian. First of all, sorry, right in front of you. First of all, happy birthday. Second of all, what misconceptions or concerns about you that you've heard in the last few weeks are you the most looking forward to dispelling when you're the coach?
It's a valid question, and I've certainly heard everything. It's been a really interesting 6 weeks or so, just in terms of being part of the engagement farming industry. It's been really interesting. However, I don't really have a great answer for your question because I really don't give a fuck. Like, honestly, I want to coach the Lakers. I want to coach the team. I don't want to dispel anything. I don't. I want to become a great coach in the NBA, and I want to win championships, and I want my players to maximize their careers. That's all I fucking care about.
Hey, Coach. Timothy Parker, Spectrum Networks, Los Angeles. I talked to Ryan Hollins about you. He said you were very meticulous in your preparation and said you had one of the most cleanest lockers, too. How does that translate into being a head coach, from a player to a head coach, that same meticulousness?
Yeah. Look, I'm sure there are coaches that have a certain level of OCD like me that have been super successful. I'm sure there's coaches that are messy that have been successful. I don't think there's like a perfect sort of personality to be a coach. I have to be me, though. You know what I mean by that? Like, I have to be me. For me to be a good head coach, I just have to be me. I trust in who I am. I know what my weaknesses are. I don't know all my blind spots as a head coach, let's be honest. I don't, because I haven't done it yet. I know what my strengths are. Like, I'm confident in myself and who I am. And if the OCD helps at all, great. It'd be fantastic. I would love it if I could walk in the coach's locker room and everybody's just as dialed in as I am with just how compartmentalized their locker is, but it's okay if it's not that way.
Hey, JJ. Jim Alexander from the Southern California News Group. Welcome back to LA, by the way. With all the experience that you've had in various facets of this game, Are you anticipating that there's going to become something, there's going to have something come up this year that you're going to say, oh boy, I didn't see that coming? And how do you handle that?
Yes.
It wasn't that question, was it?
No. My expectation around something coming up and challenges on the court, off the court, the scrutiny, all that stuff, I have the highest of expectations that things are going to be there. And yet I recognize it's probably going to be worse than I could imagine. In terms of how I would handle it, look, I don't know. What's the situation, right? What's the situation? Rob and I talked during this process about a very specific thing, and it goes back to one of my earlier answers. Like, some things can't be avoided. Some things I think can be avoided if you set those standards and expectations early. And so when you get to game 60 and something happens, you've already sort of built in the system for how to deal with that.
Dennis Freeman, the Compton Bulletin. Coach, what's your priority as far as developing and evaluating talent at the G League level?
Yeah, we definitely talked about that during the process, and I think one of the things that we discussed different hypotheticals, of course. One of the things that we discussed is like, what is the vision for how we're trying to play? And so a big part of evaluating players in the G League, second round picks, undrafted players, whatever, guys on the summer league roster, all of that thing is like, can they fit with who we're trying to be? And so, I'll just be honest with you, a big thing for me is like, you need two-way players. You need guys that can guard to be a championship level team. So there's going to be an emphasis on that whenever I evaluate anyone that we're looking to sort of bring up on one of those last roster spots.
Thank you.